Good morning, everyone. Happy Saturday, one more day before spring. Just wanted to open up to see if there are any questions or comments from the last weekend or Monday's discussions. If anyone's got any questions or comments before we get going. Okay, yeah. So just to recap, I know last weekend we looked at a lot of different aspects of the eighth sense and really how it applies to us, and several other things I want to just kind of recap and go over again. You know, we talked about accepting the status of being Elohim, and we kind of incorporated some ordaining and some of those aspects too as well. We talked about it being an ever evolving status. It's not something that we're going to just reach and attain and then we stop. We also talked about just the importance of our connection to each other once we establish and accept and identify who we truly are. You know, the integration of all the other senses and how that really aids us and helps us achieve the balance that we want with the eighth sense. And then we talk about just, once again, the memories and the past evidence. And that is a way of us to measure where we've come from and to see our growth as individuals. But also that growth means that we've achieved a certain level of knowledge and wisdom as well. And then we talked about just, like I said, continue to measure that and then continue to battle our emotions and balancing those two natures to not necessarily be so emotionally controlled in certain situations, but to be problem solvers and using our intuition, our wisdom, and our ability to understand who we are to be problem solvers. And then we'll really just talk about the sacred status and really how it applies to us and how we could use it going forward. And it's really, like I said, it's every weekend, every time we talk about this lesson, I see something else that I want to look at or really identify, make a point of, because it's like the discussions are being so good when I listen to everyone's impact and the things they're saying. It helps to just kind of evolve the message. But if there aren't any message, any more questions or comments right now, we'll pick up from there. We'll go back to sort of where we left off Monday night. If anyone's got anything, let me know. But I'll go ahead and get started with that. So, number one of the things that I really realized and is we can't deny ourselves who we are, and we can't really move forward unless we accept who we are. But the question I have is basically this right here. We basically are responsible for ourselves. And the question we all have to ask ourselves: we know what we need. We know what we have to do in life. The question is, are we disciplined enough to give ourselves what we need? And it sounds easier than, it sounds easy, but it's not as easy to control and fight this on a day-and-day basis. But just think about it. We know who we are. We understand ourselves. But we also deny ourselves sometimes. And are we disciplined enough to give ourselves what we need? And so that's the challenge for us when we start looking at incorporating the eighth sense and all these interactions to help us day in and day out. Because it is that constant battle between the two natures. When we go back and look at just how much we talked about self-discipline and how much this really depends on us. Meditation, the studying from an individual standpoint, so that the message resonates with us. The ability to rise above some of the emotions, some of the anxiety that we create in certain situations, and just letting things be, understanding that we are in control because that power and that status is given to us. But ultimately, it's going to come down to us accepting our roles of who we are and our true identity. And are we going to be disciplined enough to give it to ourselves or deny ourselves something that we know pulls us off track or makes us unbalanced in a certain situation? And then what I saw last week was that we talked so much about being aware of who we are and the importance and the power that's in that awareness. But, on the flip side of that, when we're not aware of who we are and we're not in control of it, that unawareness is really us being defiant or denying ourselves a lot of opportunities. And, and Jesus always spoke about, having the authority that was given to him, heaven and earth, and how, we were prophets, rulers, mediators. In other words, he talked about prophet, king, priest. And so I think last Monday we talked about the Melchizedek reference and how Jesus accepted that status of being king and priest at the same time, which was very rare, in biblical times, where there was actually Melchizedek was the first king and priest. And when he talked about being ordained in that order, he talked about being king and priest. And I know, I think Monday night we used some of the examples of just how we try to circumvent that system with our initiations and in our steps, whether it be religion, in the church, extending the right hand of fellowship. We try to symbolize a lot of these powers that we actually have already, but we try to make it steps and rituals and things to get to it. But in actuality, once we're aware of our identity and who we are, and we accept that these powers are in us, they're embedded in us because of our identity and who we are. And so I think that was one of the biggest things that I really saw Monday night was, okay, we understand the awareness, but the unawareness, I don't think we realize how much that we're denying or turning away from at that point in time, in which, that's just manifests itself in us trying to fix it from a worldly perspective, not necessarily our senses and in control of it. Any questions about that?
Yes, it's Ron. I think you answered something though when you talked about when you mentioned the awareness and the acceptance of that. When you talk about the two natures, when you think about balance, they should not be equal. They should not be equal in weight. The nature versus the spirituality. And what I mean by that is, back to what you said, if you accept that awareness of who you are, that rebalances things. So it's almost like you desiring to be a doctor or whatever the case may be, and you see the benefit of it, and you submit that part of you that doesn't see it so that you can become it, and you give that your attention to it. And that's part of the transformation. So the acceptance of it says that the transformation has begun. And that part that is unknown, as long as you have the desire for it and you see the results as you it's saying, the memories and the measurements that are there, you see this thing taking shape. That should always keep you in balance, even in those times when we struggle.
Yeah,
This is how.
yeah, and I mean, you're right, because the reality is that when we look at things, and that's why the connection part, it becomes so much more important for us, because no matter what we choose, no matter if we are using the senses from the internal, we talk about the internal organs, the physical sense, when things get gut wrenching or you get the chills, no matter what we do, no matter what we don't do, life is still coming at us. So the universe is still moving. So at the end of the day, we're going to operate truly as who we are and who we're supposed to be, or we're going to still try to solve problems from the unbalanced standpoint, where we're using more of the physical nature. And so at the end of the day, it's still coming at us. And the thing that we can do to help ourselves, if we operate with all the integrated senses and under that eighth sense umbrella, and we know who we are, it allows us to make less errors. It allows us to kind of, like you say, forecast in the future, because when we look at what's revealed in the future, it's basically based on making wise and sound choices in the past. And I think about the perfect example. I don't know if you guys remember, we all should remember, I probably watch more TV. You remember the Snicker commercials when they play on the person, they talk about, hey, being hungry, and you're kind of like the opposite of who you really are. And they look at you and say, well, hey, you need a Snicker. And then the person bites into the Snicker bar and they turn back into themselves. Well, we're that hungry person when we're not balanced, or we're not utilizing or accessing the authority we're given based on who we are. So we're that hungry person, and sometimes it does take something internal to feed us, to snap us back into who we are, if that makes sense. I hope that was a good example. But we can get off track, and people do. I mean, it's just reality. We do get off track, and you need something that is going to make you realize, unaware, okay, and snap you back that, hey, I'm wrong, and I let myself, maybe whether it be overwhelmed or just making a decision based on information, but we need that true identity to snap us back into who we are, and then we problem solve based on that. But if we don't operate on who we are, life is still coming at us, and so that's the fine line we have to walk. So I hope that makes sense too. And but like I said, Ron, a lot of it does come back to us. And when we talked last week, there's so much we can say and explain about how we learn and how we see the growth. And we all talk about from a mental standpoint, we mentally go back down our timeline of life, and we realize, okay, I had this situation presented to me once, and this is how I handled it. And it just, all those things demonstrate our growth and how we approach the problem. But, life doesn't stop. And so we always have to constantly incorporate these principles. And really, if we are them, we're going to live life through that. And if we're still evolving and we don't realize who we are, we're trying to get there, it's still better than operating just from a physical or just an emotional state that's encouraged by external factors or things that are like making us, forcing us to do something we perceive as not taking a loss, or we perceive as, okay, I'm going to avoid this situation because I'll come out better in the immediate, but it may not be something that benefits us long term. So there are a lot of things that we could can look at, and that kind of demonstrates where we're making a decision from, whether it be an internal driven or be externally driven. And there's a lot going on now, and we get involved in politics or some of the things that are going on just in daily life, work, schools, no matter what. And there are a lot of things that are being done based on what the outside perspective is, and not even internally benefit to that organization. And that's just a principle that if we just take the principle by itself and it's based on internal support, that's always going to be the best outcome. Because I had this discussion with somebody about processes at work, and different companies, how, and this is probably a good example, a company will pay millions of dollars to bring in an external company that's going to evaluate what's going on there. They're going to bring in this consultant firm to pay all this money. We want you to come in, look at our business, look at how we operate, and tell us what we can do better. Well, the reality is that if that company created an internal structure with the people that are hands-on and deal with it every day, they could save themselves millions by talking to the folks who are in the trenches that could, give solutions to their suggestions or tell them how to operate more efficiently, because they see it day in and day out, versus someone who watches from the outside and says, okay, yeah, I don't understand everything about you, but this is what I see. And you start to see that shift too, even in corporate America, where they're like creating these internal task force more than these external companies coming in to consult, because they realize, yeah, I'm going to get more benefit from talking to John, who's here every day and is using this process every day, and he sees the shortcut, he sees he's got a better recollection of what's going right, what's going wrong. We do certain things, if that's a good example for you. And so it's no different than us on the outside of having, a group of people making a decision for Ron, when Ron really knows what's best for Ron, and he's not going to let those people influence him. He's not going to let them say, well, Ron, this is your opportunity to do this, and I think this is what you should do. And it's not based on who Ron is or Ron's principle, but it may be based on just a physical reward. But on the flip side, if your decision is based on Ron's principle, and people that consult with you from the outside are connected with you and they understand that concept and that principle, then it's an even sounder decision that you're making based on more of a spiritual connection with a group of people that you truly know have your best interest at heart, and they have that connection at heart, versus just relying on outside influences to just help you with a decision. So I think. Oh, go ahead.
Yes, this is Ron. I just have a question for you. In that realization and the acceptance of who you are, do you ever move to a place where there are no external influences? It's all internal. what I'm getting at is, well, my first example is like this morning. I got up real early. I was going to come last night, and it was raining, and I didn't leave. But I got up real early this morning, drove here to North Augusta, and I got behind one vehicle, then I got behind another vehicle that's real slow, and I got a little frustrated. I was like, "Wow, why do these cars keep getting in my way?" And this little voice said to me, "Why did you come this way? You don't normally come this way." And that's when I just kind of hushed, and I thought, well, for whatever reason, I see this as a way of protecting me. There's some reason I need to go slow if I'm coming this way. So it just kind of calmed me down. And so I look at that, and I think uh, that started off, if I had followed that train of thought, to be an external thing, but maybe it wasn't at all. Um, and the acceptance you talk about is so important, because if you reach that level, if you reach that place, then you see the racist things that have happened in the last couple of years. You see the violence, and you see the war that is happening in Europe. You see the pandemic, and you say, "I this had not happened until I recognized that I'm Elohim." And that goes, back to what you're talking about, memory. So when you see that, and you look at that, you grow to a point. At least I think you do. I just listen to what you're saying. We grow to a point where nothing is seen anymore as external. Everything has a bearing on who you are and the decisions that are made, and how these things are shaped to move. Because as we've said, the last few months anyway, we're at a place we've never been before. There are things happening that we're not familiar with, but we trust it because of, as you said, the memory and the history and the experiences that we've had. So that was just a question to me. Do you see those exterior things no longer being exterior, but all of it fitting into what the divine plan is by the universe, and you just being a part of that, of even the catalyst for it?
Yeah, I mean, I think, we're definitely the catalyst for it. And I think the one thing we do is we remove the time constraints from things, like to where, like, because a lot of times the thing that puts the pressure on us is trying to meet a deadline or arrive at a certain period of time that we said, okay, I'm going to get there by 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock. And, I feel you right there. I give you a personal story that's going on right now. I had agreed to, and it's not even a financial thing. It's just I agreed to help these folks with a house, and then I agreed to hang some lights in another friend's house that I've got a guy that owns a light warehouse, and we just kind of connect, and I can kind of go in there and get whatever I need, and he charges kind of a minimum. And I was just telling, I knew a friend that was adding some lights. Well, they're almost in North Carolina on the other side, and then the folks that I was trying to help with their house, it's just been bad weather this week, and plus I'm working, so then naturally, hey, we can do this Saturday morning. And I said, yeah, I'll do it Saturday. But I said, hey, man, I can't do it Saturday. It'd be like after lunchtime. They wanted to get up and go 8 o'clock in the morning. But, I know what I had to do today. and then part of me was feeling that that time constraint pressure for a little bit, and and it's like I said, oh well, I'm creating this situation, and I'm not gonna like go there. I said, it'll be fine. It rained a lot this week, and it was muddy down there, and I just came back to myself and just said, whatever I need to do today, it'll get done. I'll do it in this order, and I'll still be able to get the lights because there's always external factors. People's schedule change, or for whatever reason, the weather was bad and we couldn't get into the warehouse. So we do, but I think we also, when we're in total control, we remove that time constraint, because I think timelines and deadlines that are manufactured by us with no sort of rhyme or reason, it puts that undue pressure on us to perform and do things. And those are some of the simple things that we do to ourselves. Like, we put ourselves under the gun so many times that wasn't necessary. But I think back, my gut was right. I needed to help these folks, but it just we just can't put ourselves under the gun. And so you're right that we are the catalyst and we do control a lot of it. But I think the one thing that we always got to remember too is we can take that time constraint out and really shape, well, not shape, as we said, we're not, but really control and be disciplined to what we have to do. Because ultimately, if I'm not well, I'm not going to be able to do or achieve what I need to do anyway on the outside. And so those outside influences, they even weigh on us more when we're not well, we're not operating who we are, if that makes sense.
Yes, good morning. This is Barbara.
Oh, good morning.
I want to make sure there aren't any follow-ups to what you and Ron just talked about, because I want to take this in a slightly different direction with the question I asked.
So, Barbara, good morning. This is Kathy. Before you do that, I want to ask one quick question. Based on what Ron just asked, ST, and what you just said, and when we talk about in John, John says, I saw a new heaven and a new earth. And we've been told, and from the scripture, and learned that heaven is the abode of unselfish. Does that, I guess what I'm asking is, the new earth, if that is the abode of mankind, human, does that not give us some insight to what we're learning now is for us to be able to live in this realm? Because we trying to just put it together in my mind, I'm still thinking it through. We are living in two worlds, and so when we collapse those two worlds, we will be, if I'm seeing it right based on what you guys just said, we should expect to be able to live from the inside out, even in this realm. Or am I seeing that the wrong way?
No, you're seeing it right. I mean, that's exact, because one of the scriptures I wrote down was Matthew 28:18, and just looking at it, just early on, that was Jesus saying, he said, and Jesus came up and spoke to them, saying, all authority has been given to me in heaven and on earth. So yeah, I definitely see when you collapse those two, it is an integration of everything, of both.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
I agree with that. I thought of that too, Kathy, and I think Pastor spoke on that maybe last week or a couple of weeks ago briefly. But when you look at earth or ground, it talks about awareness or consciousness, and I think that's what we're what we're doing right now is increasing the consciousness of earth, increasing spiritual awareness in the earth. So that new earth anyway, and it's being established right now. And I think how those two fit together. You know, as I said, the new heaven and the new earth. I'm not sure I know how to speak on that, but I think we're in the process of establishing that right now by increasing awareness in the earth.
I agree, Ron. That's why I asked that question because, I mean, revelation is not something that comes later. It is what we're doing now, and that scripture is in Revelation. And I think, and I agree. I feel, you know, an inner witness that is definitely what we're doing now by learning what we're learning.
Yeah.
Yeah. I agree. I think we're revealing so much of what we can do. I think there's an acknowledgement. That awareness gives us the acknowledgement of what we can do, and when we're unaware, you know, it's you know, opposite of that. We're denying what we can do. We're defying what's in front of us, and we don't see the signs and signals of what we can do. So that awareness allows us to understand what we can do. We acknowledge that, but then also we're less likely to miss the signs and signals that help us forecast, prophesize, or reveal whatever can come from decisions we make too. And I think that's the one thing that we can tap into even more, is that we're able to, you know, it's easy to solve a problem and predict the future when you've seen it happen before, and you know, it's like an equation. You know the answer, what the answer is going to be, but we can reveal so much more that's ahead of us also by being, you know, aware and tapped into it.
This is Barbara, and a good example of what Kathy and you guys just said. If you look at what's happening in Ukraine, and because we have the media today, that if you listen to the verbiage, they talk about what's in the macro. They talk about being the leader of peace. They talked about being human. They talk about the inhumanity of what's happening to Ukrainians as a people. So all of these things are part of that creation of that new earth consciousness, which is beginning to align with that spiritual consciousness. And you're right. Once they merge, you are living, as you said, Cass, from the inside out. So we can see with our eye a lot of what we've been talking about coming into fruition even now.
Yeah, I definitely agree, and I just the one, like I said, you hate, you know, there's this. We're empathetic and we sympathize too when you just know the heartache and some of the tragedy that's going on. And I remember watching that clip this week of the broadcast in Russia, and the lady that stood up behind the news anchor waving the sign saying "No more war," and it was Russian-controlled TV. And you just, you know, my instant thought was, golly, they're going to get her. And, you know, sure enough, it was just a matter of days before they got her, and they found her, you know, dead and murdered in a suitcase. And so all of this stuff's just being exposed, and I think the world is really understanding that we are connected now, more so than ever. I think people are realizing and searching for that connection. They can't all name it and see it and tell you what it is, but they feel it. And so there's a lot of movement from an internal perspective when you look at Ukraine and some of the not so much Ukraine as much as some of the individuals that are living in Russia, that internally their eighth sense is sort of kicking in, because now they are doing things and they realize that, hey, I'm putting my life in danger, but I see more of the evolution in the Russian people who view the Ukrainians as their brothers, and now they're willing to kind of stand up to a communist and tough government that doesn't allow people to speak out, but they're feeling that connection, and they're using their intuition for a long-term solution that they feel needs to be done.
Isn't it ironic that it takes this kind of violence to make us feel human, to remind us of who we are?
Yeah, I mean, we fight so hard for so many years. We fought to be separate from each other, spiritually as well. I mean, we fought so hard over the years instead of accepting to be separate. We've been trying so hard to be different and separate, and now we realize that you can't hide from the connection, but you really need each other. And so now it's that push to not operate as a separate entity, but just operate, as one. And so people are kind of gravitating back to that now. And it is. I mean, I see that happening a lot more now, just across the board, and people talking freely and openly a little more about whether it be racism, some of the things that they've done and seen in the past, and just not said anything about it. Well, now everything's sort of an open topic, and you see more people gravitating towards, hey, I'm connected, and I see that person as a person, and we've got to come together on certain issues, or they are just utilizing that awareness that they're, like I said, it's TV, it's internet, it's just technology, but it you can't help from noticing and feeling it, and it's around you every day. And Barbara, you said you had a comment or a question that you were going to make that was a little different.
Well, it really isn't different now that we've gotten to this point. What I thought about was, I wonder the extent to which we don't want to be responsible for who we are. In other words, we are aware of who we are. We know who we are. But in that awareness and that knowledge comes responsibility. And if we want to, my word, shuck and jive, keep one foot in one realm and one foot in the other, and not really, really take on the mantle of the responsibility of who we are, that's part of, that could be part of what's happening now. I mean, you just said that people are talking about racisms and all the schisms and isms out there now, and in the not only the Me Too movement, but the Black Lives Matter movement, all those big movements, everybody got caught up in that. Yeah, this is the right thing to do. But then what happens afterwards? Somehow, some way, some of us did not assume the total responsibility for what we said we believed, and then continued to move in that understanding of who we are. We just allowed it to just float away or filter away or just I don't quite know the verbiage to put on it, the words used, but there is responsibility and accountability that comes with understanding who we are.
No, I definitely agree, and that's why I opened that question up, or this comment question / question. It was like, we can't deny ourselves or lie to ourselves, but we know what we need. Are we disciplined enough to give it to ourselves? And that discipline, it also means that we're disciplined in doing the right thing for our neighbor and our brothers, whether it be discipline in our thoughts, what we say, what we do, how we problem solve, how we determine how we move forward, or are we going to take, like you said, take the unaware route and deny who we are and deny ourselves and basically defy our mission? When we say we're unaware, you're basically denying who you are. And when we're aware, we acknowledge who we are, but then it becomes accepting that status that we talked about last week, accepting everything that comes with it, and it turns into a disciplined walk. And what are we willing to do along that walk, to grow, to benefit, to connect with everyone else? That's what a connection. It doesn't do us any good to know who we are and understand everything we are and just keep it to ourselves or just stick to ourselves. So that's why the connection, it's not healthy to be alone in that regard. And so when I talked to Ron about just when you have an influence, you can have people guide you and help you do decisions when they're connected to you and they understand who your identity is, because your identity is connected to theirs. And that's a big difference than just having someone from the outside come in who's not connected to our identity, try to tell you what's best for Barbara based on what they think is just in general. It's kind of like what we were talking about Monday night when we were talking about how the neuroscience folks are trying to shape what a sense is, but they're trying to shape it from just a worldly perspective and not necessarily tap into the spiritual side of it and understanding what it is for us to really operate that way. So I definitely see what you're saying.
I think the question reminds me of several years ago. Pastor said something in a prayer, and we all agreed to it. At least I think we all agreed to it. I agreed to it. And I remember being aware of what I was agreeing to, and it really scared me. But he said something to the effect of, Lord, we are with you, and we trust where you take us. No matter what, we're willing to go, and whatever the cost may be. And I thought, wow. So I want to say amen to that. And I had to think about it, And since he said it again, and the second time he said it maybe several months later, I was more acceptable of it after having given it some thought. Because you do reach a point here where there's a cost. You see that this is going to cost you something to stay the course. You think about it as we've been talking about. We're talking about all of mankind. We're talking about humanity here, and we're talking about the unity of the Creator. Whereas we, as earthly beings, have put up divisions, and we look at diversity, and we do everything we can to separate ourselves. But it is the spirituality that unites us, and that's what we see, and that has responsibility, as Barbara said. So it's just what I thought. You asked the question.
Yeah, and Ron, when you said that, you said we did that prayer, and he said Lord, we're willing to go where you take us. And the funny thing is, he's taking us to ourselves. I mean,
Yeah.
we weren't traveling an external journey. You know, we always use references to that all the time in the past. Like, you know, we're traveling this road with, you know, the poem about the footprints in the sand, and, you know, how God walks with us, but He's taken us to ourself, to our true self, and that's the thing that you know, I'm still, honestly, I'm still wrapping my head around that. It's like, you know, it's like, and that's why I say it's a constant evolution every day. But it's the, I just, like I said, I just look at it as the breadcrumbs back to who I am, and so that's where we're being led. It's like we're following this road, but the road really leads back to who we are, and then what are we going to do with that awareness and that realization? You know, we're going to accept it and be who we're supposed to be, and this, or are we going to like deny it sometimes? And so that's where that discipline comes in, that self-discipline. And that's why, going back to day one, it's a journey that we have to basically do on our own. I mean, you think about meditating on that, and it's just, you know, that's something that we have to, you know, do on our own. But at the same time, the more people that do it, we form that connection with them that are willing to accept it, and that awareness is there in them, and we operate with that awareness together. And that's that connection and communication that we've been talking about for several weeks, because now we are individuals, but we're still connected because we've tapped back into the true source of who we are.
Mm-hmm.
And you
I
said
think
that as, go ahead.
I'll say that again.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
When you said that, it reminded me of the prodigal son. When you said that the path, what we find is that the road leads us back to who we are. It reminded me of the prodigal son, and
Mm-hmm.
and doing everything in and of its own knowledge, and by myself, from my ego, I do everything I want to do, and then when I finally come to myself, I'm right back. I go right back home. I go right back to where I started, to who I am. So it just reminded me so much of that when you said that.
Yeah, and I, you know, and from when we talk about being unselfish and doing for others, the easiest way to do that, and that's what is that I understand I'm going to be okay regardless of whatever. So it's, you know, I don't have no problem helping and doing what I need to do, because you understand who you are, and you know that you're gonna be okay. If there's a room of 100 hungry people and they need to be fed, and they say we have to, you know, we're running a shelter to feed, you know, hungry people. There's no question about whether, you know, we're gonna feed them. Is there gonna be enough? Like, you never think, okay, is there gonna be enough food for me? Because you know that you're taken care of. So spiritually and how we're moving forward, we understand who we are, and it gives us a freedom. It really, we got to understand that power we have and the freedom that we're going to be all right. So we can take on what we need to take on, because we're going to be all right. Because once we understand who we are, we know that everything we need is already there for us. That comes from an energy standpoint. We wonder how people make it, but they're just relentless givers, relentless, you know, just always giving. The energy level is always there, because even something as simple as that is taken care of, because somewhere inside of them they understand who they are. We know what we have to give. It's just a matter of the discipline and regulating ourselves and putting ourselves in the right mindset to balance those two natures and operate in who we are. And like I said, it's easier said than done, because then sometimes you step back and say, okay, I'm doing this, but can I keep this pace up, or is this is this wise? Is this something I really should do? And it's a balance, and that's those two natures coming into question again. It's never the physical or the mental. It's always the outside thoughts that come from outside, questioning the awareness or the commitment or the ability to move forward. And that's why internally, if we do it from inside, we know when to rest, when to stop. It's just a better balance, I guess.
ST?
Yes.
Good morning. This is Audrey.
Good morning.
Back to Barbara's comment about the prodigal son. Just like the prodigal son, we all have to take whatever journey is meant for us, because that journey in itself helps bring us back to ourselves, or back home, quote unquote. And then we come back to ourselves with that intuition that we were talking about, and with a greater knowledge of who we are, with more wisdom. So the journey itself is necessary for us to find our way back.
Yeah, that's perfect, because when as soon as you said that, I'm like, yeah, because the prodigal son was a perfect example that Barbara gave too. It's like we have to humble ourselves to accept that, okay, we have to, that journey, it makes us humble ourselves, because you can't lie to yourself. At the end of the day, we can't. We know our weaknesses, or we can't lie to ourselves at the end of the day. And so that journey, like the prodigal son, it brings us back to who we are, because we, at some point, at some time, we have to be honest with ourselves. And that honesty with ourselves allows us to, like what Cass said several weeks ago, I haven't been here before with a certain situation. I'm honest with myself that, hey, this is a new challenge. But then the closer and closer we get to understanding who we are, it helps us along that journey. And as things get uncovered, prodigal son returned back home, like you said, Audrey, with that wisdom, that battle-tested understanding. It just makes a big difference for us. And that even goes back to the memory when we look back. And we look back over that mental timeline, and we see the growth, and we understand the growth. May not be able to explain how things happen or how we come through it, and it seems to be that's happening to me a lot. We're like, okay, I trust what's going to happen is going to happen, but when I look back at it, you just don't see how certain things are lined up. But we all have that ability to where, like, because we trust in who we are and that kind of connection, that it pulls us through. And that's when we talked earlier too about relying on other people's journeys and their strengths to support us, because it could have been something you've done years ago, Audrey, that I noticed, and you just made it seem so easy. And I could say, man, Audrey made that seem so easy, and she just got through. It is a lot. We allow each other to problem solve based on what we've seen, and if that connection is right and where it should be, just like the prodigal son, you come back full circle after we kind of humble ourselves to open up to attaining that wisdom. Even Jesus said he had to step back and attain the wisdom. So we just gotta go to a certain point. When we get to that point, don't force it. We know ourselves. We know what we're capable of. We know what we need. We got to be disciplined enough to give ourselves what we need at that appointed time too, along that journey.
And if I can, I like Barbara and Audra's example, following through on that. Uh, that journey coming back, the full circle, as you said, also exposed something as to where we are now. The world is being exposed. The world was the son who thought that him being physically close to the Father was in a good position, but his heart and his mind was not. And he was exposed when the prodigal son returns. So a lot took place in that appeared to be again external but was not. So if you follow that story on through, uh, that taking place uh, is a lot of what we're seeing now. A lot of things that are maybe uncomfortable are being exposed that need to be exposed, because that says that there's still a journey to be had. Somebody needs to take a journey. Others need to take the journey.
Yeah. And the amount of awareness that happens in that journey. I mean, we all can look back 5 years and see where we were 5 years ago, and it's different for each person. And just look at where you are now in this journey. And even when you come back home, you're still evolving. You're still evolving because we also, I'm going to give you some stuff. If you go to Ron's house, you go to Barbara's house, Audrey's house as a guest, no matter, everybody's called. Just imagine someone else coming over to your house as a guest. We all have that connection to where you feel welcomed, and you can come over and come on in to the Kathy or Linda's house. No matter what, you will all feel welcome. But when you cross that person's threshold, that door, there's a different dynamic. Like we are all on the same page, but there's still, you're in a philosophical difference, and it could be something small or big, and that's okay because everybody has that individual identity, but we still belong to a greater identity. And so, like, if I go into your home, Ron, I'm your guest, and there's a certain philosophy that you operate your house under. I'm there as your guest, and I'm on my journey, but I'm also there as your guest, and you take me in, and we fellowship or whatever, and that also goes back. I was trying to make a point, I guess, in that example of how we're connected and how we live and learn from other people, and absorb some of their powers, because we do get tired on the journey. We do get frustrated on the journey sometimes, and those are the things that kind of pick us up and build us up to help us integrate and not necessarily get too emotional or get too much of an overwhelming feeling. It's kind of even keel, and so we all bring something to the table that connects us, even if it's from sort of a slightly different way of implementing it. It's still based on the same connection. I don't even know if that's a good example of the coming to the house, but when we go on that journey and get that awareness and come back, like the prodigal son was a great example for us all to see that you've got to kind of spread your wings, so to say, and learn more about yourself. It's we talk about the prodigal son, we talk about the wilderness. Those journeys are to bring us closer to that internal me, that embedded me. I thought someone else was ready to say something now. When we
Yeah,
when we
this
go
is
back,
Barbara.
Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just going to simply say you're so right. The son who went out there and took all the chances and experienced all that he experienced came back with a lot more wisdom about who he was than as Ron said earlier, the son who stayed home did not thought he was, he was doing the right thing, saying the right thing, doing what his father told him to do, but he never had the experiences, the unique experiences that he needed in order to take that inner look at who he was and what he thought and what he wanted, what he needed. And so therein is the difference between why the dad went out and put the cloak on the other one. And then that's why this one got miffed about it. But the other one came back with more wisdom, knowing who he was more so than the one who remained at home.
Yeah, that's perfect. Because how many of us, I try to. We were always, part of it was we had two families. So you have the one side of the family that says, "Oh man, just go out, experience the world, try this. If you fail, get back up." And you got another voice that says, stay away from this, stay away from that, don't do that, don't take this chance. And you gain more by trying and going through things than the person that just doesn't try and it just says, okay, now I'm not going to do that. I'm going to stay in this lane. I'm going to stay in this category. I'm going to stay here. And I can remember being a kid growing up, and my grandmother, some people always said, hey, stay away from the pool and the water, because there's potential of drowning. But then I went places where I was the only person at that time that didn't know how to swim. But then, so I made a conscious effort, like, hey, you know what? I've been told both ways. And I made a conscious effort to know it. I'm going to learn how to swim because I don't want to not know how to swim and take that potential of, swimmers drown too, but for myself, I'm going to learn how to swim. So I learned how to swim. And that was sort of something I overcame, and not something I know how to do. And it's just, I have a different philosophy on that than my predecessors did for me. And so just that example of someone taking the initiative, saying, okay, I want to swim, I want to learn how to swim. I just think it gives me a better feeling when I'm around water, and I'm not worried about it. I'm not worried about my kids and about swimming. It's just a different approach. And so, but if I hadn't taken that initiative, it would have been one thing that I would have been regretting now, and probably too old you're never too old, but probably too old to really do what I did as a youngster, as far as swimming in the pool and stuff. But just using that as an example too, because you grow when you stretch yourself and you push yourself and challenge yourself. The key for us is learning and walking to be Elohim is knowing when and how to challenge ourselves. But we grow by going deeper into understanding and wisdom from a spiritual perspective. Is no different than someone challenging themselves in that regard, as a comparison. So, we grow by challenging, leaving home, like the prodigal son, and just taking that journey to basically make a big circle back to yourself. I always knew I could swim. I just said, I just need to go out and learn how to do it. I always saw myself as a swimmer. And so that was in my head, and it just kind of bothered me that I was holding myself back from something that I knew I could do. And that was one thing that I remember. I can kind of look back, my mental timeline is like, that was one thing I'm glad I learned how to do. And I had friends that still didn't want to do it, and they were fine too. You just don't get in the water that's deeper than you can swim. So there's always ways to manage and overcome fear. The non-swimmer has some fears too, that everybody wants to enjoy the beach and the water. You just know how to navigate that.
Yeah, good morning, ST.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. This is George in Philly. I appreciate, again, what is being said, and especially in reference to the prodigal son. On a focus group call yesterday with some young adults, basically 19 to 24, one of the gentlemen, talked about an awakening, spiritual awakening that he had in terms of realizing, the birth of his daughter. And in that birth, he was basically expressing himself in terms of just seeing himself, being the father of this child, but in terms of realizing, what it means to him now to be a father. And I think about what is being expressed today in terms of all of us, having the opportunity to, work with humanity, but really trying to be supportive in a way that there's spiritual disciplines, that can be, they can be aware of in terms of sharing, information or being able to tap into the power within. But the reason why, I'm saying this is because I think that, people are looking for answers. People are searching in terms of working, with different spiritual disciplines or principles or tools. And one of the areas, of that road to recovery, is really looking at tools, that can be helpful. And what made me just think about the prodigal son is that, all of us have been on that road to recovery in a sense, in terms of coming to the knowledge of who we are. And because what you said earlier about, this journey for you, and I think for all of us as we begin to look at spiritual disciplines for personal transformation, but I think that because of you knowing and we're knowing that we're Elohim, we could be at that peace. But at the same time, for a young adult, 22 years old, having a child, that person is a creator. And I think to begin to look at tools that we might be able to share. And that's where, for a period of time, I've been always looking at the 12-step spiritual disciplines, because I think some way it's not just about the steps that people take or the process, but it's being able to fit in where you belong and you believe that you have the power to be able to change your situation. So I think, listening up or having some understanding about the prodigal son, how do we, share our experiences, strengths, and hope, with others, that they can come into the knowledge of not only who they are, but being able to apply those spiritual disciplines. So I just wanted to, share that thought, because in step number 11, in terms of the 12-step spiritual journey, it talks about, the spiritual disciplines of prayer and meditation. And I think that some way, when we look at education today, I don't think it's just the academic intelligences that are just, that's an important part of it, but not the only part. So I think culturally, as you say, we got to come into the knowledge of knowing who we are. And, there's some aspects of recovery. I think it's important because it's not just about the Christianity scriptures, pertaining to someone's healing, but I think looking at it holistically, where we can see it as a cultural awareness to bring healing to our land. So, again, it was just a great opportunity for me to hear from some young adults in terms of the plight that they're on, in terms of dealing with the gun violence, dealing with, whatever that challenge may be. So I truly, appreciate, again, just being able to hear that is not just one way. I think that we need to be open to that holistic approach, in terms of, that mind, body, soul, and spirit healing. So I just wanted to share those thoughts because I think as I listen to our young adults, that's where my passion and desire is, just to be able to look at how can we encourage them to realize that they're the creator, having a human experience. So I just wanted to share those thoughts this morning, with everyone. Thank you for letting me. I'm done.
No, I appreciate it, George, and that's where it goes back to that self, because everyone's different, and we do bring different attributes from the same source to the table, and someone shouldn't, like I said, shouldn't be denied of their creativity, because once you're aware of who you are, that creative spirit, it's there. Life is going to come at us regardless. So being able to, everybody wants to contribute to society, and we look at it from a big social goal. Everybody wants to be contributors, so we can't deny someone's contributions, or, we just simply have to be who we are, and just help people on the journey find out who they are as well. But I definitely agree with you, George. I mean, it's it's kind of like everybody's trying to find how they can contribute along with their identity of who they are. Everybody's sort of on that path. And you just get some people that they get stuck in a certain place longer than others.
Right. Well, I appreciate, as you say, talking about the circle and coming back to the beginning and origin. And I think that some people are finding their way, as I said before, another young lady, mentioned that she had to move back into the house with her parents, and I don't think that that's a bad thing. I think that's a good thing in the sense of being able to look at how do you, correct, or how do you, be able to offer insight or offer wisdom, but not in a way where you're being judgmental or telling someone. So I think that, again, for us to be on the call today, I don't think there's no coincidence, but I think we all are seeking and searching in terms of how to be the I am love that we are, but more importantly, seeing, progress take place where, where humanity can see that there's a way out. And we know that. But again, how do you, express it, or how do you teach it in a way where you're not being overbearing, but you're being sensitive that everybody has to come into the knowledge of knowing who they are. And so in certain circles, when you talk about being Elohim, or when you talk about how the church has, taught in terms of, systems, I think that there's an opportunity to break through that we're having, that I think we can do it in a way where people can have peace not only with themselves, but having peace with others and being able to hopefully keep the peace. But I think that there's just still that desire, that we have to uplift ourselves and uplift humanity. So again, I truly, appreciate, the journey collectively, but I appreciate it personally, because as you said, we all got to make that decision and take that walk. So again, I appreciate the dialogue this morning. I'm done.
No, thank you. Does someone else have a comment? I thought someone else was getting ready to say something to you. But I think one of the other things that George sort of touched on there too, or just kind of reminded me that our emotional intelligence and being able to balance that, a large part of our growth, and being able to kind of function and get ourselves closer to who we are. As we talk about some of the things that kind of stall us out, or have us feeling, overwhelmed, or at a place where we're not. We start letting the physical manifestations of the emotions take over some of our senses, and that goes back to where being in control and having the eighth sense allows us to kind of integrate those things, but also be disciplined enough to stay in control of them and regulate and not give them more than enough influence on us than is needed. Because our influence definitely, it comes from an internal standpoint. We talked about Charles and one example he gave a couple of weeks ago about being in the hospital and speaking to a fellow patient that's in there at the same time, or a patient that was in there. That intuition, that level that we achieve from an awareness standpoint allows us to know when to interject what we know and how to use it at that point in time to best help the situation. And that's that positive external influence that was talking earlier about Ron, is that, people will come at you from the outside all the time. It's just is it coming from a standpoint or a place of, hey, I'm connected to you and I feel this, or is it coming from a place of just someone who's just trying to direct you in the path that they want you to go? And that's the biggest difference. We talk about the external factors, but those external factors that come at us, especially, they're easier to recognize when it's not from a standpoint of a connection with a person or that communication. So I did want to kind of touch on that. It's like when we talk about helping people and understanding our roles or sharing power, that comes from a place of, it may look like external, but it really comes from a place of an internal connection. And that's a difference. So like, if I'm taking advice, I've called George a couple of times the last couple of weeks. That's based on a connection there that I'm not necessarily just taking an external solution to try and fix something or to help something. Does anybody have a question on that? But sometimes I think I don't want us to get to a place of where we just don't need anyone, or we feel like so that external pressure that we feel sometimes, it's external pressure when we look at it from the standpoint of there's no connection to me, there's no hopes that I'm making the right decision based on a lot of other things. It's just there. But when you get that connection from someone who's connected and they're influencing you, they're trying to give you some influence or advice, it's a big difference. Any other questions or comments on that?
Yes, it's Ron. I guess I'm not quite understanding the question. You're asking about those external influences. Ask it one more time. Let me. I guess I.
Oh, so basically, if I'll give an example. If it's different, like Tim Scott's giving you advice on something or trying to direct your path on something, versus say Pastor or James Richards trying to direct your path on something, the influence or the advice you're getting from James Richard is coming from a place of a connection, of an understanding of who you are. He understands who you are. It's coming from a place of connection, a proven history of it. And I'm saying that that's advice that you can take. Ultimately, it's still our decision. But I'm saying that's advice you can take and be a little more reliant on, versus someone who doesn't know you and is trying to influence your direction just based on what they want you to do. It goes back. I was just, kind of going back to that external consultant versus the internal consultant, we get advice from people that can help us shape a decision that's based on who we are. We do get that sort of influence. We just have to weed out the influence we get from people who don't care anything about who you are, and they're not on a journey at that point to find out who they are either. So I'll just say in that we have a lot of things in common with people that we're connected with, and we have things in common with people we're not connected with. But you want to be able to filter. You want to be able to filter that influence as well. So I guess that's a better term of me saying, I think one of the questions that come up is like, do we ever listen to anybody besides ourselves? And when we do, but we need to filter that decision too. And I was sort of thinking about that when George was talking about some of the kids wanting to be expressive, and so we do have to filter things, and that comes back to that wisdom. Is all I was saying, and it ultimately.
Yeah, I think ST, another example, would be as we have the opportunity to listen to some of the people over in Russia or Ukraine, and what was particularly interesting to me was some of the senior citizens or the elders, who were basically just talking about, just their own personal, assessment or their own personal feelings about what was going on. And I think to hear it from, the elders, really had a lot of impact in terms of just, what they said, that if they could, get their hands on Putin, but just to hear it from them, I think gave some significant meaning versus it just being something that they're broadcasting, on TV that somebody else is saying. So I don't know if that would be a way of looking at it, but it really kind of, it kind of appealed to me or ministered to me in a way to hear it from the grandparents or the elders. That resonates.
No, definitely, and there's a lot of people that are on the borders, and they have, it's called like it's kind of a civil war for some people because they have family on the other side, and you've got the Ukrainians taking care of injured Russian soldiers. So it's war is always tough, and we're all connected, but even with them, they see it there firsthand. Like you said, the elders, they know what it was like, and then they saw the progress and the changes, and now it's like, why are we creating all this death and destruction? And I think a lot of people on the Russian side are just, it could be a sacrifice of their own life, but they're just tired of of seeing what's going on. And much like COVID, it's a tough situation for us to try and shape. And we just have to pray and support the best outcome for it. And that's what I would put.
This is Ron. I guess one of the things I've looked at here with this war thing is really had caused me to take a closer look at me. I don't think I'm moving to the place where I may not always see a connection, but I realize that we're all in the same universe. So how much is external maybe depends on my insight or awareness. And one of the things I have struggled with the war is I recognize that Elohim is responsible for all of mankind, and my prayer is but I had to be honest about something when I prayed for the Ukrainians, or I see them and I feel sympathy for them. I do think about Africa, and I think about some of the other things that go on in the world that nobody is praying for. And I look at that and I think, wow, where am I? What do I do here? And it gets that gets a little overwhelming. Uh, and I had to stop and think about that. And my thing is, these are people that don't look like me. And it's easier to have sympathy and love for people that look like me, especially all the brutality I've seen in my lifetime with the people that look like me. So the thing is that if you expect people to follow the path that are praying and loving people that don't look like them, you have to do it as well. And so it made me, you know, look at both sides and pray for both sides, but give me a deeper love and appreciation too for what's going on with Ukraine. And I think that's why the Creator put some of them in my life, and you know, people that I can actually call friends that are from Ukraine. I have a guy that every couple months brings me a jar of honey. He has his own beehives, and you know, so I've grown to be friends with he and his family, and that's no coincidence. So I guess what I'm saying is the external is becoming internal to me, and some of it that I can't see, that the thing that may appear to be distractions may be distractions until I reach a point where I need to reach back and reflect on those things. But right now, this is kind of in your face, and you know, it made me think, just listening to this discussion, that those external things may be opportunities to refocus and to go back to your what's the word we use? Your those reflections that you have, you know, looking at your memory. So all of this kind of fits together, I guess, what I'm trying to say. And so I don't necessarily pray anymore like I used to, and I see this as entirely something different that it has given me a different place of awareness internally. And I hope that makes sense. I hope I wasn't just rambling.
Well, Ron, this is Barbara. One of the things you said, I think it was Saturday or Sunday last time, was trust the universe to reveal and unfold the truth of experiences to us, regardless of how they appear to the eyes. And so what we are now doing is accumulating those memories that the universe is resonating within us, meaning those memories that are bigger than who we thought we were, those memories that are more expansive than what we thought our mind was. So I really like that. You trust the universe to reveal and unfold it. And so when we do that, we don't have to just depend on our physical sight then.
Excellent example. I see things now like if I take something valuable and I throw it in the ocean, when I go back and look for it tomorrow, it's not going to be in the same place. I can't look for it in that same place. It's not going to be there. Just like in the past, that valuable thing, I could lay it on the sink, I could lay it on the dresser, and I knew where it would be. Whether it be in religion or my physical life, I knew where it would be. But we've crossed that threshold now, and we are spiritual beings, and we're becoming familiar with that. So I may go to that same place in the ocean and not find that thing of value, but what I trust is I am the ocean of one. So I still know where it is. I may not be able to put my eyes on it, but I know where it is. And that can still be a little difficult to wrap your mind around sometimes. And that even that kind of helps us to redirect our focus.
And also, Ron, I mean, you talked about one of the things that you were struggling with, but you also just kind of brought the point up the connection wasn't there yet for you, but it's an evolving connection. And that's what I say. I mean, like, we just look at ourselves and see where we're at, and it's always evolving. You also talk about someone who says, like, I think 2 weeks ago, I really wasn't even looking at the war from a different perspective. I just was trying to figure out what was going on. And so over the course of the last 2 weeks, I've kind of evolved, and I've looked at more what's going on and tried to figure out where I need to place my energy to, and it's just, even as a person, it's just an evolving process. We avoid certain people that we don't understand sometimes because, and there's always an awareness. You have some people who can be in a room and they don't realize how loud they are, and you're just kind of like, you're standing back saying, oh man, I don't think they're aware of how loud they're talking or whatever. And to me, it's always been like, okay, let me step back because I don't want this person yelling in my face or being that, And so I'm sort of like the last one to gravitate towards somebody like that. But over time, that person seems to be less and less loud. And it's sort of an adjustment for all of us, really. And that's just that part of meeting people where they are, or adjusting my senses to kind of hear, because part of communicating is also listening. You listen to people, but also biggest person you listen to is yourself. And sometimes we kind of gloss over really listening to ourselves. If that makes sense. But we do it. It's evolving. And you start listening to yourself more, and it pulls you in. And it's just an evolving factor. I hope that makes sense to you.
It does. Thanks, S.
Yeah. But if nothing else I'm getting today, I'm just getting like, yeah, we start each person's recognizing the difference of the connection and how that journey, because we talk about the journey so much, how that journey really, it relates to us coming back to a certain place that we just, it's always been home, it's always been there. But until you take the journey, the appreciation for it and what it is, it takes us time to get around to it, because we see it from a different perspective. When I go back home to Charleston, I grew up there, but leaving Charleston and going back and hearing people talk about how much they love going there and how they love the vacation there, and they like the history there. Well, it wasn't what I grew up in, but being away for a long time, I did go back and I appreciate different parts of it now that I didn't really experience while I was there. And it's a different mindset for me now. Like, there's certain places I didn't eat, or restaurants we just didn't go to because of the age that I was when I was there. But now when I go back there and meet with customers and stuff or whatever, I was like, I'm gonna come back and try this restaurant when I'm back down here again. We'll just go as a family, because it's a different experience sometimes. And it took me leaving and coming back for some of the stuff to develop there, and for me to kind of develop too. So it's always evolving.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's the exciting part. We get caught up in life, but the evolution and the new discoveries is what's exciting to me. Uh, I have to stop and reflect on that sometimes.
Yeah, because life is always coming, and that's it's a different challenge, and we know what the universe is. It's gonna there's so many different what do you call it, videos on the internet now, TikTok, just different things that people would say like one sentence or something that's supposed to be inspirational, and they do, and it's it's something that kind of hits home a different meaning, but we hear all the inspiration, we hear all of the things that motivate people to to do good, but until we actually feel it and lock it into ourselves, our own personality, until we just until it comes from within us, it doesn't really mean the same thing to us until we actually can bring it from within. Once we get it from within and we start and it's locked in, it has a different meaning, different connotation. It just means more versus just having the that external value of love all mankind. We have love your neighbors. You can hear that all you want until we actually internalize it and it comes from an internal place from us. That's when it really means more when we put it to action. And so as always, people can always talk at us, but until we bring it from an internal place, it just doesn't mean as much until we actually use it and do it with inside.
Yes, it sounds like you're talking about it becoming our own experience as well. In other words, the experience is a bit more, is more than just the knowing from the mind. The experience is part of the eighth sense. It's becoming it.
Yeah.
And so you can understand someone else's experience once you, as you say, it comes, you connect with it from an internal perspective, and it becomes your experience too.
No, it is definitely. I think it's internal. Just when Audrey mentioned, just about the wisdom, how wisdom is influencing our intuition, how it comes in. When we talked about how Jesus, when they were looking for him, and how he was, he said, "Yeah, I was purposely going to attain more wisdom." I think it's an internal thing for us. You're right, because once you are connected to your internal self, and that, okay, Barbara's Elohim, and I'm seeing it from the outside initially. It's like, wow, and then I journey and I connect with my internal self, and I realize I'm Elohim. It's much easier for me to communicate to you about that, and that connection becomes a lot easier to make, and it's just so much easier to communicate, to listen. It's hard, it's hard to listen to someone speaking another language and understand what they're saying. But if I learn that language and I can, which means I had to go through some discipline to study that language, to study the little nuances about it. But once I learn that from an internal perspective, and I take that discipline and I can communicate, it's like, oh well, now I can connect with Barbara a lot easier because we kind of speak the same language. I may have a different accent, and it may come from a different place, but we begin to speak the same language, and it becomes a lot easier to connect that way. But it takes if I don't know French, it takes a lot of discipline for me to study, to internalize all the verbs and all those things to speak it. And that goes back to what we said week one. That's why that internal discipline, that self-taught, is so important, because it's we have to get to the point to where we're doing it for ourselves. It means more. Any other questions or comments? And I hope this, kind of opened us up a little more this morning. There's just some things that we, that always are right in front of us, and we just, become a little more aware of it when it's on us. So I hope we all realize, or it really opened your minds to say that, we have everything at our disposal. Everything is there. And it's just a matter if we're ready to accept it, and if we're ready to discipline ourselves enough to do what we need to do at a given point in time. Because once you're aware of it, that wisdom, understanding, that knowledge, it improves all these senses we have. We integrate it, and we just put them all together. Then it's just really, we know ourselves better than anybody else. It's up to us to use it, to discipline ourselves to use it, and just to continue to develop ourselves. We're kind of responsible for our own development. We've always heard the saying, hey, lead someone else to Christ, but at the end of the day, we have to take ownership of our own development. That's sort of everything I have for today. If there aren't any questions or comments there.
Thank you, S.
No, I thank you guys. It just always, it helps to kind of get it going once we start commenting and questioning, and it just kind of helps to flow a lot better. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Esther. Appreciate you.